So, okay, well, we'll get started this morning. Good morning. Thanks everybody for joining us on the February 12th Coffee Talk. And we've got Riley Martins with Farmevo on. We're fortunate to have him present, and Riley and I go back a bit, but we'll get to that after I just go through a couple of slides of some things of interest that just do a little brief update on what's cooking for the week. And just gonna get to my admitting thing there. There we go. Great. So just as a continuation, what we're going to try and do, just touch on some key points over the last few days and stuff. And one thing is, I'm actually back in the States again, in that Wisconsin, Illinois area, and everybody here is talking about how warm it is unseasonably, just like, you know, we're feeling that up in our neck of the woods in Western Canada as well. But there's actually some guys in the next week to 10 days that are going to be starting to seed some stuff, and they're like way ahead of normal, but they want to leverage the moisture, and they're taking a look at their long terms and all the rest of it. So they're going to get the ball rolling with that. So that's that particular topic for there. And again, for us, we saw an awful lot of snow shrink up recently. So I'm not sure what everybody's opinion is of what to do, but there's going to be lots more on the weather to talk. What's going to happen in March yet, so we're not freaking out or nothing like that, but understanding what's there in the soil to start with is always really helpful. And if there's some things that tools that you can use to help understand that would be great.
Dean, John Gibson here. Just as you mentioned that, I was at a presentation at Farming Smarter yesterday at Lethbridge, and Dr. Brian Barris presented some of the update on his ultra early seeding project, and they were out record early this year by 10 days prior to their earliest ever, and they actually seeded Durham on the 2nd of February by Wainwright, Alberta.
Really?
And he's got 8 years of data now with canola, wheat, barley, and durum. You just, as soon as you can get on the ground, seed. And anyway, I just thought it was interesting so there's very seldom a yield penalty to seeding early with Western Canadian crops. Yeah.
So thanks for that, Brett. So not a lot of snow in a lot of areas this year, but not by Wainwright. So when you said yield penalty, what that means is in terms of utilization of your seeding tool, your harvest management, application of a bunch of things, that all would, I anticipate, be an adjustment on the calendars. Like, did they go through start to finish on it for you, or what?
Yeah, like he's got, like, say, 8 or 10 years of data, and they're typically done combining durum by the 10th to the 14th of August. He said that what's really bumping yields in this process is not so much the early seeding. Yeah, Robbie, stamp seeds were the poster children yesterday.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Robbie.
It's missing the 30 C temperatures during pollination in July.
Yep.
And that's where the advantage is. But anyway, I just thought it was timely that you should bring that up.
Yeah, thanks, bud. So who was it that did the presentation again?
It's Dr. Brian Barris. He's with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. He essentially took the role that Dr. Ross McKenzie had in Southern Alberta for years and years with the extension side. Okay,
because one thing we're getting a lot of questions on, John, and we're going to be talking more about this here, is doing a split application of fertilizer. One is because maybe there's some weather things you're concerned about, but the other side is doing their best to accelerate the seeding timeline with less fills and stuff. And so some of it will be pre, but there's a lot is going to be post, because guys, they didn't get to it last fall and stuff like that. So do you know, did they talk about at all what kind of a mechanism they did for the fertilizer part? Did they put all the fertilizer down in one shot, or what?
I can't speak to the early seeding project, but I can certainly get the protocols that they've followed.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it'd be nice to do that, and that sounds like a pretty interesting topic for us as well. So I'll circle back with you on that. So thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure who's been following the fertilizer market, or more to the point is who hasn't. But lots of standardized pricing out there that we're hearing urea in that $1,000 range. Had some guys that being able to book at $960, some guys booking at $950, some at $890, and some even as early as 2.5 weeks ago in that $790 range. And that, but it's kind of all over the map depending on where the local retail's inventory is at and replacement and all that stuff. But it appears as though the thing to watch in this case is the red line. That's the urea, and at this time it was still looking like we hadn't quite seen the peak of it yet. So that's that. And we had Josh Linville last week on StoneX talk about that. And bottom line is, if you know what you need, there's not a lot of payoff in delaying that, because we're going to run into some logistical problems with the calendar. And the other thing too, just getting back to this map in the States, they're going to be ahead of season to normal for fertilizer and seeding and that. And I imagine everybody will be gung-ho here depending on what the weather allows and that. So just being covered off is important. And here's just the last little bit on pricing strategy or pricing numbers and that. And we've got map is fairly static. This converts into about 1,200, 1,250 Canadian. We've got a range of urea. It looks like maybe that doesn't align with that map that I pulled off. Both of these off of DTN, but with that chart, looked like it was still trending up on that. So maybe this here is just a little beyond what that chart update was, but it looks like it was down a little bit. So anyway, that's that scoop. Getting covered off. Knowing your numbers, what's your break-even yields and benchmarks and all that stuff by crop. What's going to pay the bills this year? We always talk about that. And what I did this last week is John DePape had a really had a different way of looking at how a guy could look at hedging his new crop canola, and so I shared that on my send out to you. So that'll be on your inbox, or else on your cell. Just to have a look. And if you want to do anything about that at all or understanding more, we've got some grain marketing folks available to help with that. Just let me know and I'll help connect dots. If you want to talk to Mr. DePape directly, I can help. So with that, I found a picture of Riley on the interweb, and this actually, Riley, is the one off of the Farmevo. So I can't take credit for it or anything. So
I'll need to get a better one. No.
That's like, well, it's on the interweb, so
Yeah, so you can have it. So
I just thought I'd let you know. So I'll move off of that really quick. You want?
no worries. So
But
I know like a couple of people have seen maybe not this presentation, but some stuff from Farmevo in the past. I know Chris and I have run through it as well.
Yeah.
So just briefly before I get started, I look after business development for Farmevo across North America. What we are is we're a hardware agnostic drone software company that integrate satellite imagery, automated drone flight, and mobile ground scouting into one platform for our customers to make sure that we get top quality data that's actionable back to our customers in a time that they can still use it in their field. Perfect. Do you want to go to the next slide here?
Just say slide when you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we aim to fix is that each piece of the crop scouting tool and each level of imagery has, a different value that it provides, right? So the manual crop scouting, it's very high in depth. You're seeing everything at the leaf level, but you're only seeing what's on both sides of you as you walk through the field. The problem with that is that notebooks and pen and paper aren't great for data traceability. You only see what's on either side of you. And really another big problem is that a lot of farmers or agronomists don't have the time to really walk into a field and do an entire scout, right? So you end up with field edge scouts, or, walking just, into a few fields and doing drive-by tours of the rest. Scouting with drones typically has great level of imagery and data. The problem is it's always been complicated to operate. And a lot of that was too technical for most users. And so by the time you figured out your data, it was too late to make that decision. And then satellite. Satellite gives great analysis of full field scale. The free Sentinel satellite imagery is to about 10 meters. You can get better resolution down to about 30 centimeters. But most customers, what they're used to seeing isn't the 30 centimeter satellite imagery. They're used to seeing 3, 5, or 10 meter. And so really once you start to see that change in field health in season, it's past the point of, making that early application decision. Next slide. And so what we've done is built a platform that integrates, all 3 levels of imagery to automate reports and prescriptions for our customers. And so what that does is it automates all of the drone flight, meaning that anyone can pick up a drone, start flying with no expertise. We look after all of the drone parameters, the heights, the flights, and overlap, and automate all of the reports that come out of that. Next slide here. And so this slide just shows the difference in imagery between each of those different pathways, right? So you can see that the satellite imagery, it's giving you decent blocks of the field. This one doesn't show any health. The drone has the higher quality. It's to about a 1.5 centimeter pixel versus the one on the right is to a 10 meter pixel. And then of course the mobile ground scouting, which, is to, full clarity. Next slide here. And so has anyone on the call used drones for scouting in the past, or, is anyone familiar with drone use, or tried it, 5 years ago when it first came out kind of full bore? No, so, oh, you're muted there, Dean.
Sorry, all I was going to say is there's going to be some users for sure that this is going to go to if they were not able to hop on because there's interest. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the biggest, challenges with drones, say 5 years ago when they first came out, is that the data processing was really heavy. And so it was really strongly pushed. But what happened is everyone ended up with these several $1,000 paperweights that, just took pretty pictures of their field. And so with AI and some of the new drone technology, the cameras have gotten significantly better, meaning that you don't need a $6,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 drone to operate. And so by doing that, what we can do is integrate and make sure that we can provide data that's timely, accurate, and fast. And so the big challenge with agriculture has always been time, right? You can't be everywhere at once. Everything is spread out. I don't know many farms that have all of their fields in, a perfect block of land, right? There's 2-hour driving times between yards. And, there's a lot of difficulty in managing that scale properly, right? So some of the problems that, we found this summer was that walking a quarter section in a targeted W pattern, it was taking our customers about 2 hours to complete that walk. The problem is they're seeing only what's on either side of them and missing large areas of the field. And the satellite imagery lacks that detail to do that. And so what happens is that unless you walk directly over the problem area, you have a late detection, because by the time you can see it either from the field edge or from a further distance, you're past the point of early intervention. And so for our customers, we found that we're about 5 to 15% of yield loss that we're getting ahead of due to earlier intervention. And so just some math from the Canola Council is that a disease outbreak caught 10 days late in canola can result in over 20% lost yield. And so earlier detection can cut that loss by half or more. And so even if you're on, a dryland acre, that's still quite a costly miss. Next slide here. And so what we've built is this very user-friendly application. So like I said, our customers don't have to be drone experts. We automate every parameter. So all we do is we have 2 different scout types, a snap scout and a full scout. Snap scout is taking imagery at the leaf detail, so to 0.5 millimeter. So that's going to see things like bugs on the leaves, leaf curling, disease, cotyledon size, plants, or small emerging weeds. And the full scout's going to give you your overview of your crop health, your elevation and drainage maps, any areas that are underperforming or drown out spots, and that's to a resolution of 1.5 centimeters. The farm diary is where you're allowed to do all of that imaging within the field. So any pictures you take, any field mapping you want to do, it will all be geolocated to the portal, and you can set those as scout points for future drone missions. And how we've developed our application is that a quarter section takes only 20 minutes to fly at either the snap scout or the full scout. So what we tried to do is make it so that we were 1/6 of the time of the manual field walk. So by doing that, we can make sure that agronomists and farmers can cover significantly more fields in a day, see those fields to the leaf level on a high density grid. And while that drone is flying, because we fully automate all flight parameters, they can be walking and checking key areas of the field that they know maybe have a problem or a known weed patch. And so they can double down and be doing their manual scouting at the same time that the drone is flying. Okay, next question, or next slide. And so what we've done is made it so that in only 5 clicks, you go from your very initial flight to your insight. So what that looks like is, just go into the app, click your flight, click your field type, click start flight, click upload your data once that flight is completed, and our platform automatically uploads and generates reports based off of your crop timing, the type of crop that you're growing, its staging, and the type of flight that you flew. And so we will just notify you via email when that's available, and it will immediately push that to yourself, or if you're an agronomist, to the farmer. Next slide. Okay, you can just skip this one. And so a big dilemma that we find that we run into with our customers is that they have thousands of acres across multiple clients, multiple fields. We did a math with one of our agronomists in Southern Alberta. For him to walk all of his acres, it would equal 20+ field days for each week, doing 12 hours a day of field walks. And so the issue with that is that you're forced to prioritize a few problem fields and everything else gets a windshield tour, right? So driving by at 60 kilometers an hour, or if you're driving with Brett, 120. And you're really hoping that you don't miss anything in between those visits, right? And so the problem with that is that, those few fields that you think are problem fields, you're seeing everything in them, but you're missing potential problems developing elsewhere. And so with our software, what we do is we make it so, like I said, 120 acres in 20 minutes. The AI does the analysis immediately. The reports are auto-generated and the data is synced to the cloud. You can review it on your phone or laptop anywhere. And we've developed an agent that actually goes through and manages to tell you, based off of all of your crop parameters, what staging the crops are likely at within your region and where to fly next. And so we'll actually push directions of, what order to fly your fields to reduce driving time, what order to fly them to, really maximize the amount of flights and acres that you can scan in a day. And, it allows you to also just stay on top of all of your data management because everything is backed up to our portal. You have full access to it, to all of your historical data. And at any time within our platform, you can see overlays of 5 years of historical data for each field. Next slide. And so what that means is, for most people, is that depending on the amount of driving that they're doing, is that they can scout 3 to 5 times more acres per day at a higher resolution than what they were doing manually. The nice thing with that too is that if you're a farmer or an agronomist, you can share exact images of what you're seeing in the field with your customers. Right, you're not trying to verbally quantify, how big a weed patch is, right, or how big a disease patch is. And so, having those images in that map, it helps you to make a determination of, is this a $6 problem? Is this a $20 problem? And, are we actually getting the control that we need? With the drone flights, we're seeing detection up to 10 days earlier. This is because we're seeing a high density of that field at a leaf level insight, right? So we're seeing significantly more detail in the field. So we're catching those small patches before they become problems. And a big thing is that 5 years of historical data showing crop health maps, your disease map, weed pressures, and problem areas helps you to address fields not just in the short term, but to identify problem areas and make long-term decisions behind them. And so whether that's your soil sampling and fertilizer rates, you can actually track how your variable rate applications of fertilizer are impacting your crop health across the field over that time series. Next slide. Another thing we've built is the ability to manage your entire farm and operation from one dashboard. And so if you're spread out across different yards, you can break those down into different farms. If you're an agronomist, you can have each of your different customers in this. And so what it will do is it will show you a list of all of the fields that you have, all of the flights that you've flown, any reports that have been generated. And this is where it will actually push you into, where to go next. And so from this dashboard, you can also see, is it a certain region that we're having this weed outbreak? Is it a certain region that we're seeing this disease or this lower crop health? And so we are taking, data from several different points, not just the drone flights, in order to help make management decisions that save you time and money on where to scout next and where is likely to be your biggest problem areas. Next slide. And so this is what that dashboard actually looks like in practice. And so this is done with Corteva in Southern Alberta. And so with them, we can actually track all input consumptions, operation costs across those, and the ROI from each application. And so what we do is we actually track a yield estimate through the entire season. And so based off of the targeted applications that they're making, whether that's, a broadcast application or variable rate, we can monitor in real time how that is impacting the yield estimation or the yield capacity at that time of the season. And so part of the reason that we do that isn't just for the high value irrigated crops that, you can pretty much throw good money after bad at them, and some years you'll see a return. But this is really designed to make those optimization decisions in areas that, costs are quite a bit tighter. Making the wrong application decision, doesn't just cost you the product, but it can cost you, a fair bit of potential yield as well. So we want to make sure that we're maximizing where those inputs are going down for each individual area. Next slide here, Brett, or Dean, you're the one running this. So from that dashboard, we can look at a field diary. And so what this diary does is it's how we track all of that yield estimation and health. So we pull in any weather station data, the satellite imagery between flights, and soil moisture probes, irrigation, weather events. And so we track how your crop responds across the entire season to all applications and inputs that have gone into it. And so you can see on August 8th, there's about a ½ inch of rain or irrigation that went down, but they applied herbicide. So the crop health drops as it has to metabolize that herbicide. And once that metabolization has happened, the crop health starts to rebound. And so what we use this for is tracking days since planting, growing degree days, your crop health and canopy to automate what your next flight is going to be. So because we look after every parameter, we make it so that when you get to the field, there's no messing around with how to fly the drone. It's already set up, ready to go. And by monitoring the satellite imagery in the background and all different parameters, we actually look to make sure that we can notify you before the crop health trend starts to go down. So we know that based off of your canopy coverage, the weather, the time of season and crop, that okay, you likely have a heavy dew still in that canopy at noon, right? So what we'll do is we'll actually push notifications saying you should go and walk that field or conduct a flight to look for early disease before it starts to see a drop in that crop health. Any questions on this field diary or how we're monitoring that? No, so next slide. And so what that actually looks like for you as an operation is monitoring maps on plant stand counts, your health maps, disease and pest detection, boundary and acreage delineations to make sure that you're actually seeding, you're buying inputs on what you've actually seeded or your actual field boundaries, yield estimations, and leaf level images of your entire field. Next slide. I think this is where we start to get into more, so you can skip this one. That's okay. And so the two scouts that we offered earlier are the full scout at that higher flight height, and then the snap scout at a really high half millimeter resolution. And so if we go to the next slide, you'll see what those actually look like in practice. Next slide here. So the full scout boundary delineation, what we're doing here is taking your seeding map, conducting a flight, and actually seeing exactly what your GPS acres are versus what your seeding plan says. And so while we do this flight, we also take an elevation map to create a drainage map. And using that drainage map isn't just for a farmer to understand or make better drainage decisions, but we also use that as anticipation of crop health throughout the season in different zones to understand how irrigation and water is going to impact what that yield potential will be throughout the season. Where this becomes quite valuable is that a lot of farms, this is their acres, but they don't have a full quantification of what's actually missing because of low spots in the field. What are unseedable areas? What are we actually missing in corners? And so when you quantify that across one field, it might be a fairly small number, but when you expand that across an entire farm, we've averaged about, our one farm that we looked at was about 3 acres per field different from their actual boundaries versus the acres that they had listed for each field size. So if you multiply that out across, say, 5,000 acres, right, even say 50 fields, that's going to be 150 acres different of actual inputs that are needed versus what the farmer had, listed as their needs. Next slide here.
Yeah, before we do that, the other thing is that there's a tremendous amount of leased acres, right? And somebody's always been told it's 153 acres. Well, maybe it's always been 148, right? And things like that. And nowadays, just because of the risk that is inherent, there's more and more operations that are going to actual harvested acres as a number versus the aggregate amount, just based on the cost of the inputs versus the returns and all the rest of it. So anyway, there's more than one. There's lots of applications to this kind of stuff, right? And there's other ways to get at it, but this is one.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things from our standpoint is a lot of times we don't necessarily know all of the uses until, a farmer tells us this is what we use it for, right? And then our team will go through and generate better reports that, outline the stages that they're looking at. The plant stand count analysis is one of the 0.5 millimeter resolution flights that we do. So what it's giving is a geo-reference plant stand across your entire field. It's not just looking at the stand count, but it's looking at germination across the entire field and plant-to-plant spacing between every single plant that's been imaged. And so the reason it does that is that if you have a really high density of plants within, 2 or 3 or 4 inches of each other, and then nothing for the next 2 feet, a stand count with a ruler, with the meter stick is going to, technically show that you have the stand count, but that's not going to translate to an actual, yield number within the field because there's only so much that branching can take into effect. And so we will monitor that stand count, the branching, and recommend if there's areas of reseeding that are needed, or if we think that the plant branching will account for enough of that yield buildup to minimize the cost of application of a reseed. Next slide. This is just what that looks like, on a higher density image in canola. Every image here is taken with a drone called the DJI Mini 4 Pro. So it's about a $760 drone from Best Buy. And so what we've tried to do as a company is to make sure that, we can provide as much value as accessibly as we can for our customers, right? We don't want people to be experts or have to go out and have a large hardware lift to be able to do this. We want it to be, this is how we can provide value at the lowest cost possible. Next slide. These crop health maps are taken at the 1.5 centimeter resolution across the entire field. They're useful for, fine tuning a lot of the satellite imaging maps that show their damage reports. It's a more in-depth crop health distribution to pull out potential damage areas. From this map, we can generate variable rate applications. Those applications, we will suggest which areas of the field should have an application, or also the rate of application as a function of what's next to it from a health level. And so another thing too is that a farmer might say, I don't have as much value from an individual health map. But where they become quite interesting and where we can pull data is that we use these maps in a time series, across the entire season and across multiple seasons in order to better understand, the disease formation, what that impact of biomass or low spots has on yield in relation to weather and, moisture patterns. And so our system is actually taking every piece of information that we get in order to generate more accurate data in the future. Next slide. This is where we can provide a lot of value, is in the anomaly detection. And so the image on the left is actually us looking for volunteer canola in our seed production company's fields the year prior to them seeding into canola. So the field on the left, what we do is we actually segment every single plant that's part of the crop and remove those from the image area. And then we run another analysis where we look at everything that's not crop, quantify all of the plants that are not part of your crop. And then in this case, we looked at every plant that wasn't crop and it was weed and ran a further analysis to say, is it canola, yes or no? And then based off of this canola, we actually generate a full weed map of where that canola was found inside of the field. For a farmer or an agronomist, what that will look like is just a widespread weed map of weed density and populations across your field to better understand, where your problem areas are, what that spread of weeds looks like across your field. And after herbicide application, you can fly again to see, did we get control of that patch within our field, or do we have potential resistance? So our software right now, certain weeds we can name. Other weeds that we don't have enough data to name accurately, we will list as an anomaly. And so each of those anomalies will be quantified so that you can still see them differentiated and broken out on your field. But we want to, as a company, make sure that we're not assigning an incorrect name to something, because we found that if we give a name to something too soon, then people trust technology too much and don't take the time to really look at that distribution. So we err on the side of caution and will identify it as an anomaly prior to giving it a name. On the right, you can see a potato field that we have. Potatoes are probably, as a company, where we have the most data overall. And so we're actually able to apply a name to most of the diseases in potatoes and have the information and data to be able to differentiate between, okay, based off of the weather patterns and moisture and nutrients and fertilization, is this likely to be a disease or is it likely to be an initial sign of a nutrient deficiency? So we have built that database to be able to accurately do that in potatoes. In crops that we don't do that yet, what we'll do is we'll segment that leaf by leaf as an anomaly. Any questions on this side of things in the anomaly detection?
Are you able to provide a listing of the weeds that you have picked out? Like a big one for us, obviously, like kochia as an example. Yeah. Is it in your list or what?
Yeah, so kochia we can do quite accurately right now. The thing is that kochia at certain stages or weeds at certain stages are really easy to identify and name. Where it becomes more difficult is that we can't just go to Google Maps or Google Images and pull a whole list of kochia images and train our models on them. What we have to see is kochia at all growth stages, kochia where it's partially covered when it's small by another leaf, or when it's sick or diseased, right? So we have to see the weeds at every different stage and every different health to be able to provide a really high accuracy. And so certain weeds will have the ability to name them at different stages. But say at very early emergence, it might not have that ability to name it yet. Right, and so that's where we classify as an anomaly, just to ensure that we are capturing that, and we can capture that over the time. We as a team will actually go in and we will name and tag each weed. And so your report may show names on it, even if it's not technically done by the AI in our system. And so if you see a report come up initially, it might show things listed as anomalies. And then a day later you go in and you'll see it as individual weeds. It's that our team is going in and training our models and building that. You also have the ability as a farmer or an agronomist to tag weeds or disease inside of the field or name anomalies, and it will automatically extrapolate that across the entire field and group those by name.
Okay.
Next slide. And so what this looks like, and I tried to change some of these numbers to, quantify a little bit more of a normal farming operation. A lot of what we've done in the past has been seed production, where, the difference between a canola making its purity versus not is, $14 a bushel versus $1,000 a bag. And so those economies of scale are massive. But what we found is that, our targeted spraying, when we do variable rate applications, we can do those just as a shapefile that can be uploaded to, your high clearance sprayer, a drone for, a fungicide, or not fungicide, but say you're doing nutritional, right? You're pretty limited on what you can do via the PMRA right now as far as herbicides go. But if you can target only, say, the 30 acres that are going to see the biggest response to a fungicide, at $18 an acre, the application is saving you, $2,880 across, a quarter section. And so what we do is we will segment based off of where you're likely to see the biggest return on that fungicide, especially in a dry year. So, whether that's looking at, okay, are we protecting what looks the best, or are we trying to, get ahead of a disease in this small patch? The early detection, if we're saying that we're protecting 10% of the yield, so looking back at the initial canola council estimate of, catching something 10 days late can be 20% of your yield. If we're saying that we're protecting the 50% of that number, on a 40 bushel crop at 14 bushels an acre, that early detection is saving a farmer $8,960 across that one field on that one application. And so, a big part of what we try to do is make it so that the time savings just aren't in detection or in, spraying or acreage corrections. We want to be able, we want our customers to find value in the time savings of, scouting their fields, having better data and decision-making tools that they're making those field or their application decisions based off of. And we really want it to be that you have the data to go back at the end of the season as well and say, what worked, what didn't, how can we continuously improve the operation? Because, if I look at my past notes, they're all scribbled in a notebook, and I go back a week later and I can't understand them, let alone at the end of the season. So, we really try to make sure that, we can provide as much value to our customers across as many different avenues as possible. Next slide. I think this is the last one. And so this is just a brief overview of some of the companies that are currently using our software. The crops in the bottom aren't an exhaustive list, but we're pretty active. We're across canola, forage seed production, potatoes, sugar beets. Forestry is a huge vertical for us, as is monitoring the spread of noxious and invasive weed species. And so, we've had some pretty big growth and some strong partnerships that have helped us to expand our data sets and our information to better, provide for our agronomists, retail, farmer customers.
That's all. That was the last slide, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of information, and as you know, there's the whole portal and everything behind it. You can go pretty in-depth into the weeds, but
no, that's really interesting to me, Riley. Well, thank you for very much. You put a lot of information into a really small window, so thank you for you brought it with a lot of clarity and stuff, and easy to understand, I think. And there's probably, I'll just open it up. We're happy to. Does anybody have any questions that were spurred from this presentation so far? Anything that you have in your head? I'll start. So you've identified some weeds, and that's, I'm anticipating it's a learning model, so that will end up continuing to grow, right?
Yeah.
On a whatever basis. Just had had one question come in. Do you have an indication of what the cost is yet? Like, how are you giving any guidelines for that? Like, we're going to be set up as a distributor for you and whatnot, but what's happening out in the wilderness there?
Yeah, so our highest cost here is $3 an acre for the season, and then it goes down on volume, right? And like I said, Dean will work with iFarm as a kind of as an aggregator of totals, right? To make sure that it's not everybody has their own total volume, right? It'll be an iFarm aggregated total that will lower the cost across the entire network. And so, but for that kind of initial cost, what it gives you is full access to the scouting platform, the mobile flight app, the portal, and all of the management software within that, and unlimited flights and analysis on those acres for the season. So it's not a cost every time you fly. It's the same cost regardless of, if you fly that field twice a week. and run 100 different analyses. Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
Maybe you covered this. Sorry, I had to grab a couple phone calls, but you mentioned yesterday that you're able to API the field information in from different places too?
Yeah, so we don't expect that our customers are going to be inputting all of their application data into our system, as well as into 3 or 4 other applications. And so we will API that information into our system. So if you have existing moisture probes, are putting everything into my John Deere, wherever that data is coming from, we can pull that into our system to provide, better value, right? If you have, if you're paying for, higher quality satellite imagery somewhere else, using other softwares with that, we can work with those to use them in our software as well.
Okay, another question I've got, and you mentioned that you mentioned a very specific economically priced drone. What was that you guys have used?
So we're using, it's called the DJI Mini 4 Pro. And so the reason that we recommend that drone over, there's a newer model out called the DJI Mini 5 Pro. So for us to take full control over a drone versus, just exporting a mission file to it, for us to fully autonomously fly that, we need to have what's called the software developer kit available. And so the Mini 4 Pro has that kit available. The Mini 5 Pro does not. So what that difference looks like is, with the Mini 4 Pro, we basically virtually control the sticks on the controller of the drone. So we are in live time updating the drone's height, its speed, all of its parameters throughout the field. Whereas if we don't have that software developer kit, we have to kind of export a hard-coded file into the existing DJI app that is not the greatest. And so any field height variations, anything like that, instead of being autonomous, it's almost like just a standard cruise control that sets it and goes, but you're taking images from different heights and you have more variability in your data quality.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. And that was, like you were saying, it was Best Buy was under $1,000 or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What we'll do, guys, is if everybody puts a bunch of people put up their hands, I'll just go get a skid of the damn things, whatever, just to get it. Let me know if you have interest in it, and we'll do that. And then another question I had was, is there another level of demonstration where you can kind of have an actual demonstration of what the thing looks like and what that data looks like and all of that stuff, and we can maybe do a sidebar presentation of that? Or if you guys have interest in doing a one-on-one with Riley and you don't want me there and all that, I don't care, that's fine, just let me know and I'll connect you guys together. And if there's a pool of yous that would like to know more and kind of go through it, get into the weeds of it a little bit, so to speak, then we'll facilitate that as well in another one of these things. So that part's fine. Yeah.
Travis, I see your question here. We can work with the Mavic 3 multispectral as well. And in our heat maps that I showed, that was done off of just a visible light spectrum, but we have a toggle switch in our application between multispectral and the RGB. So any of those health maps would be taken using the multispectral bands.
Yeah, we've got a number of guys that already have existing drones, so they just want to bolt them onto it. They may even have a spray drone, right, or whatever. $1,000 ones are maybe little less cumbersome to fiddle around with and all the rest of it. But whatever. Hey, you guys have the ability to adapt, I'm assuming, for whatever needs to happen there. Yeah,
we can adapt with, just about anything. It just is, a matter of what that flight parameter looks like. And, like I said, we automate it. So depending on the drone, one is taking the image at 12 feet high or 4 meters high. The other drone might be taking that same quality image from 40 meters high.
Oh, that's one other thing that was a bit unique from what I recall our visit yesterday, Riley, is that your unit will absolutely follow the contours of the ground, right? Relative to the flying a straight across thing. So it really helps a lot with the consistency of outcome with that topography and all that too.
Yeah, and we automate that based on the hardware or drone that you're flying. So, if someone's flying, with the $700 or $800 drone, it's taking the same image quality as the $6,000 drone because of the parameters that we're putting into it.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and I see your last question here, Travis. So we can pretty easily detect that. What we do is we actually segment every plant by its leaf. So once we see a plant and identify that individual plant, we actually look at anomalies based off of leaf by leaf individually instead of as a whole plant level. So as long as we can see that leaf, we can see any like shot holes in it, any curling. It just is a matter of, in a heavy canopy, we have to be able to see a leaf with that, insect damage on it.
Yeah, that was another thing that I was going to ask you in terms of identifying, fine, there's a pest, but can you ID which pest it is, like a flea beetle versus something else? And then the same thing goes with disease types. And the last thing would be nutritional factors.
Yeah. Yeah. And so most of those right now will be, marked as an anomaly. Insects are actually easier to individually identify than a lot of the weed species, right? Because they have more defined, growth stages and lives, right? I mean, you look at a picture of a weed in the field and then you look at it in a book, and the book image never looks like what the thing you're seeing in the field is. And then, naming between nutrient deficiencies and diseases, that's where it takes a little bit more learning, because the initial symptoms of both can appear very similar, right? And so that's where, we're taking into more of that historical weather and application history data. But right now it's kind of at the stage of we're identifying it as an issue, and then working with the farmer agronomist to hard code what that is.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Any other questions before we let Riley go? Well, this has been really great, folks, and thank you so much, Riley. Appreciate great questions. And what we'll do is I'm going to be around. If you guys want to connect any dots, shoot me a text and I'll give you a buzz as soon as I'm available. I just got another meeting or two here right away, but I'll be happy to hit you back.